All right, so good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Mariana Medeiros, and I'm the Senior Project Manager at the Northeast Recycling Council, NERC. And I'm excited to welcome you to today's Material Reuse Forum 8, Online Resale Business Models. Online resale has existed in various forms for years, but with the growing popularity of thrifting and secondhand shopping, larger platforms have been rapidly expanding. This forum will explore three key business models, peer-to-peer consignment and business to consumer, and examine the opportunities and challenges of scaling reuse in the digital scape. Um, a little bit of what NERC is before we begin. So, who we are a nonprofit working to minimize waste, conserve natural resources, and advance a sustainable economy. What we do, we bridge informational gaps across the public and private sectors, develop educational resources, and advance conversations on critical issues across sustainable materials management. Our reach, we serve the 11 states of the Northeast and nationwide, works directly with state, regional, and local agencies, the private sector, trade associations, and others to help address sustainability challenges and achieve environmental goals. The agenda for today's webinar is from 1:30 to 1:35. It's just our small introduction. 1:35 to 2:25, we'll have our speakers' presentations. And then the rest until 3 p.m. we'll have the facilitated Q&A by our moderator, Emily Baker. Um, our overview, just for us to have a little bit of a housekeeping, this webinar is being recorded. So a recording and a copy of this presentation, all presentations will be available on the NERC website, nerc.org, and you will receive an email with the link afterward. So please, for all the questions, submit your questions to the chat box to submit them, and we will hold a Q&A session at the end of all presentations. Now let's meet our speakers. We have Carmen Gama. She's the Director of Circular Design at Eileen Fisher. She's at New York and an expert in circular design. As the Director of Circular Design at Eileen Fisher, she develops scalable systems to extend the life cycle of textiles and reduce fashion's environmental impact. Her innovative work has been featured in Vogue, the New York Times, and the Wall Street Journal. We also have today Thomas Roca, Sales and Partner Network Development at ShareTribe. Thomas leads the customer team at ShareTribe, a company that powers over 1,000 peer-to-peer marketplaces, many focused on reuse and sustainability. With 6 years of experience, he helps entrepreneurs turn ideas into thriving platforms, making online resale accessible and scalable. And last but not least, we have Dr. Yuli Fuentes Mendel, founder and executive director of the Footwear Collective. Dr. Yuli is a leader in fashion, technology, and climate innovation, serving as program director for MIT's Climate Grant Challenges and Fabric Innovation Lab, and is the founder of the Footwear Collective. She has a PhD in biomedical sciences from UMass Medical School and has launched global initiatives like the science, connecting science and design to drive sustainability in the fashion industry. So now I'm going to pass along to Emily Baker, our moderator, and we'll have our presentations. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mariani. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the forum. My name is Emily Barker. I'm the Executive Director of Reuse Minnesota. I'm coming to you from the Twin Cities metro area and really excited to be part of this conversation today. My organization does education and advocacy in the reuse and repair space. We do a lot with promoting businesses, and I'm personally very interested in this topic of online resale and how it fits into this question of sustainable and ethical resale. We know that it's definitely a changing market and it's exciting because there's a lot more people interested in this space, but we also know that there can be challenges and a lot of opportunities. As Mariani mentioned, if you want to drop questions in the chat, or not in the chat, excuse me, in the Q&A as we go, please do that. And I will hold most of those to the end unless there's like a small clarifying question for someone between speakers, but we'll hold most of those to the end and then we'll have some dialogue then. All right. So we are going to start with Carmen. If you want to go ahead and share your
Hi, thank
screen,
you
go
so
ahead.
much for having. Yes, I just want to say that my internet's very choppy, so I'm gonna try to do my best not to lose you all. I'm in Canada. Um, okay. So, for those who are not very familiar with Eileen Fisher is a women's wear clothing company which we focus on creating system dressing simple and timeless. We are a B Corp. We've been in business for over 40 years. We ensure that all our designs are part of our circular manufacturing process. We focus on having sustainable and social practices in our whole company. And we started a take back program in 2009. What that means is like we buy back all of the garments that our customers no longer want. We give them a $5 coupon, and then I'll talk later about what we do with that. But so from our take back program, we actually started the take back program very organically, as we always say, do things here in Eileen Fisher. We started it by just asking employees to bring back some of the Eileen Fisher garments that they have in their closets, and also started by doing kind of like a sale of Eileen Fisher clothes, like Eileen's herself, her clothes, because Eileen Fisher Foundation wanted to kind of like gather some funds to support some of the women's programs for the foundation. So we sold some of these garments in the local Eileen Fisher store at Irvington in New York. And the customers really love those garments. So we started thinking about it, how can we expand this program? And then in 2013, we opened this program to our customers, and we did this campaign like you see on the right. We say, we like your clothes back. Thank you. We like our clothes back. Thank you very much. And since then, we have collected over 2.6 million garments, and that number goes up on a daily basis. And we have resold, donated, or remade these garments more than 2.3 million. So how does our program work? So we only take back Eileen Fisher garments, right? You can return any of the Eileen Fisher to one of our 50 plus stores located in United States, or you can send it directly to our warehouse, a recycling center in Irvington, New York. We give you a $5 coupon regardless of the condition of the garment or the item. You can return clothing, accessories, or the shoes, even like home goods. Back in the day, we used to do that. We have basically you can just bring it to the stores. The store associates will give you a coupon right away, which you can redeem in any Eileen Fisher stores or Eileen Fisher Renew, which is our secondhand resale platform. And then what happened to those garments? The store sent those clothing to our recycling center in New York, and that's where everything gets inspected by condition. So if it's in great condition, it goes to a resale category. Then if it's like slightly flawed but still wearable, then we donate it to our partner Souls for Soul. And then the rest, if it's deemed damaged, like beyond wear, it's part of our, damage inventory, which I'm going to be talking about it because my area, what I do at Eileen Fisher, which I didn't talk about early, is that I am in charge of figuring out what to do with all of the garments that we cannot resell through our take back program. So once these items have been like identified, so which is technically almost a third of it's resellable, a third is donation, and a third is damage. We get about 25,000 garments on a monthly basis from our customers. That's a lot of garments. But so everything gets sorted in house. And after that, for the resale aspect, we send to our local dry cleaner partners to clean the resellable garments, but we are not cleaning as we receive them. Everything, as they're sorting for resale, everything gets sorted by category and then by season. So think about like spring jackets, fall jackets, because again, we don't clean as we receive. We clean strategically on the season that's coming ahead and also the needs of the stores. Um, then I'm going to talk more about like the damage inventory. But also for resale, we have a couple partners for a resale program. So the first one is that our re-commerce, we partner with a company that's called Trove. They're the ones who, once we kind of clean the garments, we send them to our warehouse in the Northeast, and they're the ones who fulfill, like inspect, take photos, and then put all of the listings on on our website, which is eileenfisherrenew.com. And they're the ones who deal with customer service, customer returns. So they're the ones who handle all of that operation. And then also some of the other partners that help us with this program is our local dry cleaners, as I mentioned before, but we also work with a company that's called Hamster. They're the ones who it's a company that started with like mending and like tailoring for scale, but like we work with them for cleaning. So they're the ones who actually clean for our Trove business because they can handle more volume than our local dry cleaners. Also, back in the day, previous to the pandemic, we used to work with another fulfillment company who used to be the one who was sorting and like cleaning our inventory. But as of summer of 2023, we took back all of the sortation in-house because our team really understands our clothing. They've been working with us for over 10 years. Like Angela, the one that you see in the photo, she's been with us for 10 years. So literally just by touch, she really understands what's the material. Like she understands like if some of the stains are going to be able to be removed from the dry cleaners or not. So our team is pretty efficient. Whatever comes in on a daily basis, everything gets open. We actually get around like 30 boxes from UPS on a daily basis. And everything gets processed on that same day. So again, our team is very efficient on that. And so again, in 2023, we received a little bit over 250,000 garments. And like I mentioned before, 50% of them are sellable, 20 donations, and 30 are damaged. So what do we do with the inventory that we can resell? So this is just a chart to tell you more or less of the fibers that come back to us, because it's very important for us to understand these in order to find a solution. So the majority of the garments that come back through our doors, I mean, these are garments, right? The fiber is like cotton, 31%, then goes linen, wool. You would think that wool will be in a higher level because of Eileen Fisher, but like wool is a third one, then silk, and then blends. Our blends category is everything that is like blended. Think about your like um, animal fibers with cellulosics, even like organic cotton, with organic linen. Those are considered blends, and I'll explain why in a bit. So we have three main damage solutions, right? And I oversee all of these solutions with internal teams. All of these solutions touch a lot of the teams at Eileen Fisher, from supply chain, the design team, the product development team, the renew team. So everybody really does touches these operations. It's like a huge collaboration internally and externally. So the first one is like the special collection. So we group three collections into one, which is mending, right? We do like mended collections, but this is visual mending, right? They're like capsule collections, which we're about to drop one, a linen mended collection in March 27. Everything gets done in-house. Our product development team flexes into our factory. They're extremely talented. We've been working with them for a really long time. So at this point, they're really like knowledgeable on how to mend, how to remanufacture, and all of these. Then the other special collections that we do is like over dye. We work with an artist, like a dye house in Seattle that it's called Botanical Colors. So every spring we send some like linen or like white linen or like cotton garments to her, Kathy Katori's team, and they're the ones who like over dye, like natural dew, indigo, and then we sell them at our renewed channels and also some of Eileen Fisher stores. And then the reason collections, these are like, think about like it's a remanufacturing. So for those who don't know what remanufacturing is, it's like the act of like deconstructing a garment or like a gadget or like like a electronic, and then using the parts to make entirely new products. So in this case, we deconstruct the garments and we use those pieces as fabric, the ones that are not damaged, to make entirely new clothes. So that's the special collections. That's a solution. Again, everything happens in-house. I oversee from design all the way to production. And that's about 10% of our inventory gets allocated to these solutions. Then the next one is fiber to fiber recycling. So that's about 65% of the inventory gets allocated to that. So that is, think about 100% cotton, 100% linen, 100% wool. These are garments that we separate according to our partners who are gonna mechanical recycling these fibers into new yarn. So for example, the wool, our partner in Italy, right? They don't care if they're the category of the item or like the color. They only care that it has to be 100% wool. So like cashmere or like, mohair, those garments can actually go in there. So once we have like enough like to fill a container, we send it to our partner, and then they use some of those garments to make entirely new yarn for us to use for the first life of the garments, right? And the linen, for example, it's different from the wool because our partner in Spain, Halotex, they don't want to take all of the garments. They only want us to send them exactly what we're going to be turning into new yarn for our products. And then the cotton we have sent to Guatemala with a partner, the New Denim Project, which they're the ones who kind of like recycle our cotton spandex garments and then made a new yarn. And that yarn was sent to our partner in Peru, who we normally have that supply chain to make our organic cotton sweaters. So that's for fiber recycling. And downcycling, 25% of the inventory gets allocated to that. So for downcycling, it's all about like shoddy insulation, for the built and automobile industry. So I know that I already kind of like gave a big explanation, but I want to just kind of like go in dive. Like this is just like, our indigo collections that we do on a yearly basis. And like they sell out, we do 1,000 to 200 units, and then our customers really love it. And Eileen is very passionate about these collections. Again, for the mended collection, we do kind of like visual mending, it can be like darning or it can be patchwork. And then for remanufacturing collections, again, like this is like a jacket that was just like paneled with different other coats. Everything, it's done in house, from deconstructing the garments, cutting them, sewing them back together. And this is some of the product that we have done in the past. Again, this is made entirely from Eileen Fisher damaged garments. And a lot of these pieces don't look like they're made out of garments, which is always my biggest, like, my biggest challenge is like you have to make garments that they follow the Eileen Fisher aesthetic because at the end of the day, we're part of Eileen Fisher, right? So how do we avoid the patchworky look, which is beautiful, but like for Eileen Fisher, maybe it doesn't work that way. So we're constantly kind of like thinking about how do we do remanufacturing, mending, and over dye that follow the Eileen Fisher aesthetic. So for fiber recycling, again, this is an example of we used to actually separate 100% silk for fiber recycling, but like our partner doesn't want to do that anymore because recycling silk, mechanical recycling silk is actually really hard on the machinery. Silk, people think that it's like so soft and everything, but as soon as you start applying friction to silk, it's a very tough material. So it also creates sparks as soon as you start like the process of chopping it. So that's a liability for the company. But again, we send like our 100% silk garments. They chop it, they spin it into your new yarn, and they made an entirely new garment for Eileen Fisher. So some of the fiber to fiber recycling logistics, again, it's sorted by fiber, then it's sent to our warehouse in New Jersey, packed by, for example, the linen, it actually has to be sorted by color, right? Because we need to when we're ready to do a new development or a new yarn, I don't want to have to resort everything again. Again, it's like we're always trying to think like how do we touch things less, right? So as soon as they're identified, this is a linen fiber garment for fiber recycling, they sort it into color. Because then I can go to the warehouse and be like, hey, can you pull all of the linen blue from the shelves because we're doing a new yarn? Then our warehouse, if you can see, they're like yellow stickers all of our fibers are color coded because again, I'm not gonna have that warehouse trying to read like small tags. So they know that linen is yellow. So they pull the linen pallets and then they start like pulling the blue boxes. and then everything gets baled. So it's like compresses in the machine and then it gets packed to be shipped either to Europe, South America. We don't do this in the United States because we've been all of these partners that we send our garments to, we've been working with them way before we started fiber recycling with them. So they understand our quality that it's needed for Eileen Fisher. Some of the challenges, is the cost, right? It's we all of the expenses associated from sortation, transportation, that is incurred by us. Pre-processing, a lot of these garments have to be pre-processed, so removing trims, so that is also like a burden. Logistics, matching import duties, regulations. Each country has its own, sometimes, oh, actually, last time that we sent our linen to Halitex, which was in Morocco, the facility located, it was stuck in customs for 6 months. So it's like a lot of like, learning process because the linear model doesn't really necessarily work sometimes for the circular model. And then again, recycling locations are all over the world. So, we need technology infrastructure, the market demand. So there's a lot of challenges on that. And then the last solution, again, what I talked about is a downcycling, right? This is just some photos of how, like, we just the shredded of all of these garments together look like, and they use it for the build industry and the automobile industry. So as you can see, having a take back program and be fully committed to be responsible for these garments that you're producing is not a simple endeavor, right? We really wanted to extend the life cycle of these garments as much as you can. And then, like, as you can see, there's no one solution, right? Besides from reselling, if you want to address damages, you have to tackle it from many different angles. So yes, that was me, and I hope you have a lot of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. That was amazing. I actually learned a ton that so it was really great to hear. I think my favorite thing you said is that circularity, or kind of in a summary of what you said, was circularity is often stuck in existing linear models. And I think that is like so true and part of what we can talk about in a little bit. All right, Thomas, you want to go ahead and see if your screen will come up there?
Yes. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. Let's see. All right. How's it look?
Looks great. Yeah, just hit your slideshow button and you should be good to go. Looks perfect.
You can see me? Everything's good?
Yes, you're good.
All right, thanks. Hello everyone. My name's Thomas Roca. I'm calling you today from unusually rainy Orange County, but I work for a Finnish company called ShareTribe, which is a software company that provides tools to help online marketplaces be built. And I'll tell you a little bit about my experience helping these online marketplaces be created in my capacity as a customer advocate at ShareTribe. So what am I talking about with a peer-to-peer marketplace, right? So it's important to remember this is a unique kind of business. Peer-to-peer marketplaces are two-sided. There's at least two user types when we're talking about a marketplace. There's the supply and the demand, and they have different needs. Supply, they want to sell their offerings and make sure that they have efficient transactions. Demand, on the other side, has some need that it wants met. As a marketplace, your success hinges on ensuring that both sides have their needs met. The concept in marketplaces is called liquidity. The idea that how easily can both of these sides get what they want out of the platform. As a result, trust is really important in two-sided marketplaces. You're facilitating connections between strangers, and in order to do that, you need to have trust. Trust is facilitated in many different ways on platforms. I think the most prominent example is reviews play a really key role in these platforms. Peer-to-peer marketplaces are also digital, or oftentimes digital. They don't need to be, but in today's world, they tend to be. So that means that they're expected to provide a lot of features for the two sides that exist or that function on that marketplace, right? On the demand side, you might think about the fact that they need to facilitate product discovery. They also need to facilitate purchasing and include all the latest payment methods. They can also, or they should also, help their customers dispute any challenging situations that they've had and resolve issues. For suppliers, they need to be able to pay out money, right? Give them their earnings and navigate the compliance space that's required there. They need to give them storefront, right? A place and a way to sell their wares. And they need to give them tools to help them fulfill the orders that they make, right? So these digital platforms need to be quite sophisticated to enable peer-to-peer connections. Finally, an important hallmark of marketplaces are network effects. Network effects are this idea that the platform gets more valuable the more users that join, often in a linear fashion, right? So it's the idea that as more buyers come to the platform, that will drive more sellers to come to the platform because there's now more demand for their products. Well, in the meantime, then you get more buyers because now you have more supply on the marketplace, right? This isn't unique to a marketplace. Network effects happen in a lot of different ways. Wikipedia uses this example of a phone, right? Where when you just have two phones in the world, a phone's not that valuable or not that interesting. But as more phones come online, the phone itself becomes more valuable, and exponentially so. Exponentially so. Yeah. So the implication for marketplaces is that the business model is actually quite attractive, that you might reach this point where it becomes a self-reinforcing cycle where you bring on more users, and as those users come on, your acquisition costs go down because those users are increasing the value of your platform exponentially. So some examples of peer-to-peer marketplaces. Thankfully, these are household names nowadays. There's eBay, the OG, started in 1995, right? A place to sell everything. Then there's Airbnb and Uber. These are more recent examples. They came out of the financial crisis. And really their message or the message of peer-to-peer platforms in general, right, around cutting out the middleman and taking advantage of underutilized assets and creating more independent financial streams resonated in the wake of that financial crisis and has really made peer-to-peer a household name. In the sort of resale space, there's a lot of different platforms on offer, right? Fashion is such a big industry, and the resale fashion has become quite huge. The name Vinted might ring a bell. Poshmark as well. These are for selling whatever kinds of clothes that you have, from children's clothes to really specialty items as well. And then there's lots of platforms for particular things like StockX, where you can resell your sneakers in particular. So now that we know a little bit more about marketplaces, let's talk about building marketplaces, because that's what I do a lot of, and why I'm here talking to you today, right? I mentioned I work for a company called ShareTribe. ShareTribe's a Finnish company, and we provide software for helping create an online marketplace. You can think about us as a Wix or Squarespace or Shopify for building a marketplace website, right? So the differentiator for us from these other platforms is that you're building a very particular kind of website with us, a marketplace website, right? Which, as we know, has this two-sided nature to it, which makes it unique from, for example, an e-commerce store that you can set up with these different things. Nevertheless, we're still an online software tool, right? So here I'm showing you a screenshot of what our tool looks like. You have a configuration panel where you're selecting different options and making different choices on how your website, your marketplace website, should work. With our tool, you can create all kinds of different marketplaces. You can create rental, service, booking, peer-to-peer product marketplaces, right? So if you have some tools lying around and you notice your neighbor has some tools lying around, you could build a marketplace for using or renting those tools. Or if you have, for example, you've noticed that you had children recently, they're growing out of their clothes, and your community of parents also has the same problem. You could use our tool to create a marketplace for selling those used children's clothing, and that often happens. I have a note here about serving founders. So ShareTribe is specifically focused on helping new marketplaces be built, right? So we like to say we serve founders, not enterprises. We're interested in creating more marketplaces in the world rather than not. And why we believe that is we think marketplaces are really awesome. It's an incredible platform, an incredible way to structure a market. And it can have really positive environmental or sustainability effects on the environmental side, right? You can imagine how a marketplace reduces waste by connecting people to pre-loved or pre-used products rather than encouraging them to buy new products. It also encourages economic sustainability, right? By driving competition and reducing complexity towards sourcing materials, as well as bringing robustness to a market, bringing more suppliers online. And it can be socially sustainable too, giving resource access and community empowerment. Quite often at ShareTribe, we see that after some kind of disaster, for example, the LA fires recently, or the fires in Lahaina a year ago, COVID, the war in Ukraine, people will set up marketplaces in order to connect different services in those communities to each other, right? That the most efficient way to arrange the supply and the demand can be by creating a platform where these people can find themselves, right? And that can be tremendously sustainable for communities. Unfortunately, it's not easy to build a peer-to-peer marketplace. So I'd like to explore some of these challenges that we see sort of sitting at the ground floor of marketplaces being created. First of all, the technology needs to be really sophisticated, and you have a lot to build before you can have a marketplace, right? For example, you need to facilitate a search process for your demand side. You need to make it possible for people to discover what it is that they want, to discover the things that they're looking for. At the same time, you need to give providers tools to show what it is that they're offering, right? Then you need to connect these people, right? You need to let them transact through your platform. And you need to know what's going on. You're neither of these users, and in order to know whether you're being successful or not, you need to have some kind of view of how is that interaction happening, what's going on, what's working, what's not. All that is to say that there's a lot to build. Payments in particular are challenging for online marketplaces because there's a lot of regulations, and rightfully so. It's where your platform is providing payment solutions. You're allowing your providers to earn money through it, but you are not those providers themselves. So the payment platforms have a torrid time validating and validating who it is that they're actually sending money to, because it's not you, it's a third-party business, right? And that means that the costs are high, and indeed the service isn't very great. Many of you probably know PayPal. It's a household name in terms of a solution, but they don't serve marketplace businesses below a certain threshold of volume because the risk of fraud is too high. The headaches of facilitating payments on a marketplace are too high, and they don't do that. Marketplaces also face this cold start problem, right? The value of a platform is in the users that participate in that platform. But when you start, you don't have any users, so there isn't any value that you're really providing, right? This is sometimes called the chicken or egg problem in marketplaces. Do you first bring on supply? But how do you do that? You don't have any customers to purchase their items. Do you first bring on customers, but you don't have any supply where those items are being offered, right? This is really difficult for a marketplace to navigate. And indeed, sitting on the ground floor with these marketplaces, they often don't get past this point, right? They build the solution, but bringing the users online doesn't happen because there is no value in the platform without the users there. Finally, the unit economics are really challenging for a starting marketplace. So even if you do start to bring users onto the platform, you might find that you're spending way more money than you're making, right? The reason for that is that you are spending a lot of money bringing on customers, right? That, okay, you don't have a lot of value, so you're incentivizing value, right? You might be offering discounts or promotions or running ads to bring in customers, but all of that costs a lot. At the same time, you have high upfront costs, right? We've already gone through that technology investment that you need to make in order to have your platform run. It's not unusual that a starting marketplace would need to spend over $100,000 developing all the solutions that they need for a marketplace to work, and that is before they have any users, right? So you have these really high costs. You also don't have a lot of revenue. Again, you're not providing a lot of value, and you need to incentivize use of the platform. So you have your earnings aren't that great. These are pretty serious challenges for starting a marketplace and overcoming sort of that launch phase. How do marketplaces go about it? There's sort of two approaches that we see. One is size, right? That scaling as fast as possible to a particular size, and this is done through large infusions of capital. Now, capital holders, VCs, they're very interested in marketplaces that have a large potential market because of those network effects, right? Once you reach a certain size, the idea is that you're a self-fulfilling prophecy. You can't lose. So investors are happy to fund a marketplace, suffer those high acquisition costs to build a sufficiently large community to the point where then you have monopoly power and the ability to raise your margins, right? And those network effects are in effect. Problem with this is it can lead to unintended consequences. It's not a particularly sustainable model, or at least those sustainability potentials of a marketplace platform can kind of go awry, right? I think the most classic example of this is Airbnb, right? Airbnb started as a platform where you could rent your room as your spare room to a intrepid traveler, right? And they get a place to stay and you make a little bit of money. Well, the platform's become so big and the intensive so large that the supply has become super professionalized, right? You now have really Airbnb dominated by vacation rentals, and that is having undesirable outcomes on local communities, right? People are these vacation rentals are buying up properties, and people can't afford to live in highly desirable tourist areas because the incentives to sell on Airbnb are much higher than to live in that place, right? And that's, I would say, an unintended consequence. I think Barcelona over the years has been sort of the prime example of these consequences playing out on a local community as people there have really raised their voice about how difficult living situations have become as a result of the forces beyond their control from these big platforms. Uber is another example, right? That in that case, they have a host of stories of running against or running up against regulations in their quest to scale to a really large size, right? That they essentially happily ignored rules around how you pay workers or the kinds of taxi services you can provide or can't provide, usually a regulated field. They ignored those in that quest to capture enough market, and as a result, they're now a market leader and they exercise a lot of market power. But have they really made the world more sustainable or better? Resale platforms can have a similar problem. It's hard to quantify this stuff, right? But you can imagine how with secondhand retail becoming so much more popular, right? Are we substituting demand that would have been there for new products, or are we actually driving more demand for new product? Because there's always that idea, oh, I could sell it later, right? That there's this vibrant market on it. Not necessarily the fault of any one platform. It's just an interesting consequence of a really large marketplace. Now, at ShareTribe, we see sort of another way to go around that the challenges of building a marketplace, and that is in being super focused. So rather than going broader, going deeper. And what this looks like is having very specific and unique niches that marketplaces operate, right? Um, it, this is a sort of a funny example we share with all our new employees that, some of the most um, popular, like successful marketplaces on ShareTribe actually are around the sale of used sex toys, right? Which is not something you would imagine there to be a market around. And it's very niche, but it actually happens. And then you can have a vibrant economy around it. The way to enable these things is by bringing down cost, or at least one way, right? That's how what we believe, that by making that technology simpler, it's easier to overcome those unfavorable economics, have less fixed cost in the beginning, and be able to launch your marketplace faster and cheaper, and reach a profitable stage without necessarily needing to become absolutely massive. I've had the privilege in my job to see many such marketplaces be built. Unfortunately, I can't share most of them with you. They don't want to let you know about what the secret sauce that powers them. But I have a couple that I can, just to highlight some of the interesting things people come up with, or maybe you might not expect resale. One is perfumes, right? You might buy cologne or a perfume that you're not interested in, or you're not interested in, doesn't work for you, or you're not using as much as you thought. Well, you can resell it on perfume.com, operating in Paris currently, but you can see this model replicating elsewhere. You might be a hobbyist pilot, and there is a platform for you to buy and sell your aircraft. So too is one of the most interesting ones. I didn't know this, but if you sew, there's a lot of leftover supplies like yarn or cloth that you don't use, and there on Sew too, there's a vibrant market around reselling those sewing supplies. And finally, Refound is a new marketplace where they're bringing peer-to-peer resale to furniture in the Denver area. So those are just some examples of kind of small niche marketplaces that are out there in the world, and that ShareTribe we hope to see more of. Hope you have some questions, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Thomas. That was it's helpful to understand kind of what goes into it. I think sometimes, you mentioned eBay, and I'm a millennial, so it's like I'm familiar with eBay for my life. But it is interesting to see all of the different ones that are out there. I'm a sewist too, so I'm going to check out that one, although it looks like it's maybe just in France. But I really appreciate you sharing that. I really liked the question, and I'd love to come back to it as we think about our discussion. Is resale driving demand or offsetting demand of new purchases, or driving demand for more new stuff? I think that that's a really important question for those of us in the resale space to think about, because it certainly it's certainly a challenge. So, all right, we're going to go ahead and have Yuli present next, and then we will get into the discussion.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
Yes, and your screen looks great.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. It's really exciting to see that we still have 13 participants in this webinar, which is exciting and counting. I'm here to talk about shoes. Who wants to talk about shoes? And I want to make it a little bit more interactive. I think I cannot see you, but promise me that you're raising your hand if you're wearing shoes. So it's one of those items that has been overlooked in this conversation of circularity. So I want to give you some data and also some work that we've been doing here in the Footwear Collective. Just for numbers, annually we built 23.9 billions, and that was 2022. I think 2024 was 25 billion pairs of shoes a year. So those are a lot of shoes. And the dichotomy of this product is that many of those last about 50 years if you really take care well of a pair of shoes. So we have a moment where we are building 23 pairs of shoes, and then we are about 8 billion citizens in the world. So how do we do with this disparity? First, I think is we need to think about shoes as our basic form of transportation. I think taking the category of when you walk, you run, the shoe is an important item for us as humans. So rethinking this process has been one of the last 2 years for my career and kind of understanding how are we going to really think about this disparity. So if you still have your hands up, I'm sure you don't. How many of those you think go into at least the US landfills annually? The reality check, I think, is a data point that EPA did a couple of years ago. The reality check is that 300 millions of those pairs are today accounted in landfills, but there are many of those shoes that go outside of United States. The picture is a picture I took in the Atacama Desert in Chile. For many shoes that are not being used, but they go into these landfills and they don't really disappear. So yes, we're using it, we're having a really good time, but we also don't know what to do with them. And that's exactly the solutions that we can provide here in thinking about shoes in this conversation. Just to give you projections, this is a real problem from United States. If we think about the projections of what get discarded, if we keep the rate of buying this many shoes and kind of sending those to landfills, probably in 2028 is a projection that many landfills will be clogged by this product. So we have a problem. Another place where this happens, and I want you also to raise your hands and go back to your room and see, is we tend to keep our shoes in the closet. So understanding the behavior of how are we going to think again about the use of shoes in, especially for this audience, about reusing, rethinking, repairing, requires a whole different new approach. So my work has been understanding why we love shoes so much and how do we really solve this problem, because with that same love for this product, we can really reinvent our relationship with an item that allow us to walk, run, and move. The technicality of understanding why footwear has been overlooked in circularity has three important points. Number one is in 2022, in my role in MIT as the program director of climate, we published a report that everyone can have, and the QR is on the screen for you to find the link, which is the Footwear Manifesto. We put all the many companies together in a room to really start challenging why we have been thinking a lot about resales and rethinkings and recycling of apparel, but why we haven't done anything about shoes. And at the same time, what could we be doing about shoes? And then we found three big findings in that report. The first thing is that footwear is a complex item. Normally, for those who are in the MERF world, they get put in the textile category, but you don't really have only textile. You have a complexity of materials. You have leather, EVA, TPU, rubber. It's many parts. In itself is a complex system that needs to be solved. So that's why in many cases, when you say shoes, you go like, oh, we're dealing with something really more complicated here. The infrastructure for what it has to be with dealing with the taking apart shoes or recovering materials from shoes or selling shoes and the viable markets that are available for this are just starting. We're in a really nascent moment for what can we do with shoes in another life. And then there is a lack of alignment among the industry because at the same time that we have so many shoes, all of these companies are looking to really capture your eyes and your dollars in the shoe that they want you to buy. So if you think about this problem in how much competition you're having an industry trying to put you footwear in your feet, we really need to think about what they can collaborate and how they can collaborate. That report also has the system integration that you need to think about thinking about circular shoe system, which has four major areas, right? So we need to create alignments in the material management, right? So if a company is using rubber, how do we really create alignments in the same rubber across the materials? And instead to think about waste, how do we think about this, about material management? The second one is the after-sale infrastructure, everything that, and I will show you some examples of why the shoe is challenging in this space. We need to think about what is going to be the machinery that is going to shrink the shoes, that is going to clean the shoes, and so on. But there is also the understanding and the behavioral science that needs to happen in this strong relationship that we do have with our shoes. And how can we use that behavior to really flip it in a stewardship behavior instead to just a purchasing behavior? And then what are going to be the circular business model that we can build in order to really create a system that enabled us to think about shoes as a circular product? With all of those pieces in mind, in 2023, we hear a lot of the companies saying, we have tried our own system, we have tried to put it out in the market, but we cannot do it alone. So we created a model where collaboration among different companies can have a chance to really have all the resources, save costs for companies, and go all together to build what is going to be the future of circular footwear in the world. That gave rise to what we found as a nonprofit. It's called the Footwear Collective. The Footwear Collective is an entity powered by a nonprofit called AirDNA, which has been founded by the former deputy director of NASA. And in Footwear Collective, we have today 11 members that are all working together to figure it out collective action in catalyzing what can we do with those many billion pairs of shoes that have been produced, and how can we create active conversations about extending the life of those and extending and maintaining that product in circulation. We work there in three major pillars. And for the particular question that we are talking here about reuse and resell, most of that work gets done in our pillar of consumer behavior. We also work in understanding the materials and the infrastructure. And we have active tables that the companies are doing, but also executing projects to test and understand how are we going to build this system. A lot of this work needs three components. One, it needs to create a language of data, which was Thomas speaking about, what is the data that will kind of be embedded in the information if you want to create, for example, a website place. What are the partnerships that needs to exist in order to build the infrastructure and the materials that needs to be expanded and scale up in order to be a circular model? And then what are going to be the future investments that needs to be executed in collaboration among many companies, in this case for the footwear space. So if you think about the manufacturing of a shoe, we really need to reimagine the ways, and we need to think about pre-competitive collaboration across many of these points of intervention that the system will allow you to kind of create circularity and collaboration for shoes. I want to go to questions and conversations, so I'm going to go really fast in this presentation because, but I want to focus in some examples in the space where we are talking here. The consumer behavior really is important in that moment. When you go to the retailer, you buy your shoes, and now the shoes is in your hands. It's really in the hands of people, it's in the closet of people, and they have a relationship there that could really serve a lot of purposes. There is a challenge of the financial infrastructure that needs to exist for this, how companies keep building a revenue. Meanwhile, the consumers are really reestablishing their behavior with shoes. And there is a lot of creation of economies if you start thinking about creative ways in how you can really enhance this experience in a different way. One of the examples is repair. I think shoes is a particular category where there are certain types of shoes that can really have the chance to be repaired. Repair depends heavily in two aspects. One is the knowledge. You need to have cobblers and people who knows about the manufacturing process of shoes. And you also need certain categories of shoes that are enabled to really be repairable. Is culturally driven. I think if you think about, and that's an example of repair in Japan, you need the right culture to really embrace and respect repair as a new way of buying and purchasing products. But if you think about the one item that was made by a company, and this is an example from one of our members, Vibram, who provides soles for all the shoes for about 250 companies in the world. If you the upper can stay really nice and clean, but if you repair only the sole, you're giving a new life to that shoe. It's critical that the companies recover funding and revenue out of that transaction, but it's also the challenge that you need to have people who is skilled and workforce development that know how to go change and have tools to rebuild that shoe. On top of that, that shoe, it's like a car. It cannot break. Normally, if shoes have the consequence that they need to be fully in standards because you're walking and it's your transportation system. So you really need to repair them in a form that is going to allow you not to create any sickness or foods or any of those ergonomic problems that a shoe requires when it's being built. So repair is one option here, but it has to be done in the right place with the right pair of shoes and with the right culture in order to start building a new economy and new type of jobs. The second one is the idea of renting. How many of you have gone to bowling and rent the shoes to go to the bowling place? The reason why this is challenging is because shoe is a category that you will normally think about my shoe, but also my stinky shoe. So you really need to think about the cleaning systems and to really kind of create this as a scale. There are companies that are evolving in the market to really kind of create the cleaning of these products in order for you to have the right instance with the right case to be renting those projects. That example on the top here is a company called, sorry, I'm blinding the name of the company, but they are renting shoes for climbing in walls, right? So really a specific instant that you don't need to have your own pair of shoes to run and claim in a wall, but it's taking advantage to allow people to have the right equipment because you really need to have the right equipment to do a walking wall. Same cases for ski boots and so on. So you really need to understand what type of product that can be clean and can last long life could be put together in order to kind of create the right renting space and cleaning place. Another interesting thing about shoes is that shoes have created in the sneaker space a huge secondary markets. I think here you have one of the components it's a market that today is about $1.8 billion in 2020, where you have one pair of sneakers and then you buy your secondhand sneaker. eBay today creates 1 million pairs of shoes gets sold in eBay as I know for today. There's also, Thomas mentioned this, StockX, which has been really a marketplace designed to only sell the shoes. And look at those prices. These people is buying pairs of shoes in the $260,000, $900,000. So you really need to understand how the culture and the communities that are really attained to buy that product in that secondhand market are going to respond to create a market. And that has to be the motto and the motivation here. Sneakerheads, it's a culture. And you will find in your town some vintage market that will bring this collectible item that creates a really remarkable network and community around one item that today is a sneaker. Finally, there's been some innovations in terms of creating marketplace from company to company. For example, one of our companies, New Balance, have the Reconsider program, which is you use the pair, you send it back, and then you can buy a pair that has been barely used. But in order to do that, the company has to incur costs because, of course, you want to buy a pair that is clean or is secondary inventory that hasn't been sold. But you really need to disrupt, which I think Carmen has done really well with Elaine Fisher, this trend of the day that you want to buy that pair because it's trendy in the fashion, but also usability for the product that potentially if you want to run, you really need a good pair of shoes to run that marathon. So Reconsider is one of those. You have thread up in the high heels. And I want you to read the condition here. So they're really open to tell you, hey, this is has a life, it has visible flaws, and it might need repair. So it requires a consumer adoption to really go in and say, I might use that pair of high heels, but I'm being told and I've been built a trust that I need to clean it or I need to repair it. And the other one is one other company, which has been the cloud system for on running, where they're making a shoe that is one single material that you subscribe monthly, you pay $25, and then you use it. And when the shoe is not longer in good condition, you send it back, and then you receive a new pair because you are in subscription model, which is kind of the Netflix of shoes. So companies are starting to experiment and innovate, and these secondary marketplaces are important for us to really rethink how do we extend the life of shoes, but how we also create transactions for the companies to be incentivized to create these marketplaces. Finally, which is my favorite, there are many shoes that no longer work. And those are the ones potentially that ended in the landfill. We also need to deal with that. And the beauty of circular economy is that you can create new realities with these materials. And here's when the shoe industry interacts with technologies that could shrink these products and think critically about the materials that those are made. And then start intercepting with different downcycling of upcycling industries, because these materials are really precious. When a shoe company decide what material to put in a shoe, they really have high standards. So that also is really exciting. And I hope at some point in my lifetime, we can see this system integrated in any city in the world. I'm from Massachusetts, in Boston. The first shoemaker, this is a picture that is in the 1850s. Men and women from Natick were making 1,300 pairs of shoes. That was a lot of shoes at that time. Today we're making 3 billions. But we're also building technologies where we are thinking about robotics of building shoes that will be heavily impactful for how do we think about the circularity of these products. We can create jobs and we can create technologies with shoes. And that's also why it's so exciting to think about this category, particularly in what are we doing with the end of life of this product. This is our mission. Again, this is a Footwear Collective, and anybody who is here who wants to talk, chat, and think and talk more about this reuse case particularly, really excited to be invited here, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Yuli. That was really great. I feel like we could have a whole day conversation about this. And I really appreciate you talking about the manufacturing side so much in this. And it's actually, we have a number of questions from the audience, but I'm going to start us off with a question. And I think you can probably all answer this. Thomas, I think you could too from your perspective. But there is a lot of conversation with reuse, this question of quality, how do we, when things are being resold, if you had to give an elevator pitch to manufacturers of new products, what would it be and how would you inspire them to incorporate reuse and circularity thinking into their products? So if you had to convince a manufacturer to say, hey, reuse is really important and here's why you should incorporate it into your business, what would your advice to manufacturers be? Any thoughts on that question?
Well, I can say that, we have examples of businesses, manufacturers who create secondhand marketplaces for their products with our solutions. And that is obviously more opportunities to extend the life cycle of your product and capture the value of that extended life cycle, right? That you can once somebody buys your product, that's maybe not the last time they interact with you then, and they can sell again that product through your through a repurpose marketplace that you specifically own and host for that product. And that way you can also control the quality, control the story, and get more data about, hey, this person just sold their coat. Maybe they need to buy a new coat, right? Not that we want that, but you know, if I'm pitching to the manufacturers, that's what I would say.
Carmen, you are a manufacturer, so I suppose you'd be talking to yourself. But if you were to try to convince other people in your sector or others, do you have like a message that you would, a mo way you would motivate them to think about it the way you do?
Well, I can talk, I can actually give a couple examples of how we have to convince other partners to
Mm,
come on the journey with us on circularity. So for example, there was like a partner in Rhode Island where one of the first solutions that we're trying to do in is kind of like do woven felt, like non-woven. There's a lot of non-woven manufacturers in United States. So for me, it was a no-brainer to turn our wool into like cool non-woven felt to make the Eileen Fisher iconic, coats. So I went with him. It really actually took 4 years to convince him because, it was more like, it's like a dialogue, right? It was trying to understand their operation, where they're coming from, and how it can they can potentially integrate our post-consumer garments in their supply chain by first understanding what are the challenges on their end, right? And what are the benefits for them to actually work with us. So in this case, it was like, you guys are puny to me. I work with like, government and huge, but the Eileen Fisher name brings a lot of value
mm,
my corporation because I want to start getting into the textile, like the fashion industry. So you always kind of have to understand what is the benefit on their side to actually kind of like lure them in, right? So that's how 4 years later we convince them into doing that. But that happens with everything, the partners that we have, like the one in Spain or well, actually, the one in Spain, they were coming for a tour to see our facility. And at that point, again, understanding what are their services, what do they do on the post-consumer supply chain, recycling landscape, and they were doing it already, right? And then, so that's when I started like, okay, what about if we start like sending you our garments? They're like, well, we haven't done that with anyone for, their garments back to their clothing. Again, it's like a conversation. It's like, how can they
mm.
benefit from doing that? And then, I mean, it's like a risk that they both take, both parties. So I think those are just two examples that I wanted to
Yeah.
mention. Hopefully that answers that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely a nuanced conversation. You're absolutely correct for sure. Yuli, did you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I just came back from my trip to Vietnam, which is one of the largest manufacturers of footwear in the world. And it's interesting because particularly for the case of shoes, which I'm going to speak about that here, we have put collaboration as a tool to really de-risk and reduce the cost of infrastructure for really creating product that has more durability, that you can create new things and new transactions. You really need to have the durability there if you really want to use a product that is going to have several lives. And a manufacturer wants to make a good product. They're not in the shine to build a bad product. Like they're not telling you,
Hmm.
listen, in this $10 pair of shoes, and I'm really proud about it. They really want to build the best of the category with the money and the resources they have. So then coming in with a collaborative model where now you can release a little bit of the pricing aspect with many companies and same practices for the factory, it release a little bit of pressure to kind of give hope for, okay, maybe we can do better and we can build this type of model here. So collaboration has been our tool of magic. We are 2 years in the model, but I think it's building really strong and interesting conversations, particularly for this category.
I like that. Collaboration is the tool of magic. I feel the same way in our work. It's very, very, very true. There's a couple of questions about EPR, extended producer responsibility, and not everyone has to answer this, but if you have thoughts on it, what are your thoughts on EPR type policies to drive reuse in the marketplace? And I guess I should say, for folks who are not familiar with EPR, it's basically the idea that manufacturers need to have a stake in the kind of life of their products after they're purchased by a consumer, in making sure that there's positive ends. So right now, there's a lot of EPR policies happening around packaging or mattresses and batteries. So we could talk about it specific related to clothing, since two of you are in the apparel sector. But just generally, if you have any thoughts on how EPR plays into this conversation for motivating reuse and resale.
I can comment from the wide perspective of products. So you have many leverage in order to enable this type of economy. Regulation is one, and it's a really strong one. But if regulation is written in a way that prevents business incentives, you're really kind of shooting yourself. I think for the apparel sector, we have a good example of European regulation going really strong in putting out there the EPR law, but it's also accompanied by behavioral communities. France, they pay you back to repair your shoe, but it's also a structure and culture and government infrastructure that is completely different. So I think it's always about the context of what that EPR law is. In our case, I think we have a wide canvas for United States, particularly in the footwear sector, especially except for what California is doing and working with that and taking advantage of that. I think what people ignore is that the EPR law basically does is build a fund of money that comes from the providers and the manufacturers to really solve in country or in the region what could be done with the alternative of that waste. It requires the knowledge of the product. So we are working in building manuals of how do you build and make a shoe, what materials are you need to deal with. Packaging did the same historically. It was beautifully and also unorchestrated. If it would have been more synchronous, you will have the same language. So how do we learn about building a good EPR law for the right product? And I think we don't have to know it all. So I think it's also a strong conversation with the policymakers in where can you stop certain things, right? So when somebody say, I'm going to put you a cap in certain amount of recycled material in something, people need to know that, for example, in a cotton, you have so many cycles to get to the little of the fiber to make a new yarn, right? So that's chemistry. So how you don't need to be a policymaker that is also a chemist, but how do you create an interdisciplinary team that build these EPR laws that are going to be good for society, they're going to be good for companies, and it's going to be also to maintain an enjoyable conversation with the products that you purchase. So that's my view on EPR, but it's a good driver if being developed well.
Thank you for sharing that. I agree. I think the cultural piece is often understated by both policymakers and, I mean, especially in the policymaking space. I think even within the United States, here in Minnesota, our interest in repair and thing may be very different than it is in other parts of the country. And so I think that it's often, the policies that work here may never pass in another state. And similarly, countries around the world. And I imagine even like in your platforms, Thomas, your work, like you see different demand for different types of platforms in different parts of the world, right? Because of how the culture supports reuse and repair. And that really impacts what people are interested in. And I know we see a shift. I'm seeing a shift more and more with younger folks who are very interested, whether it's from an environmental perspective or a fashion sustainability, where there is more drive from young people, which is very exciting. On the topic of young people, I actually want to totally shift gears, and this kind of goes, it's probably more to Carmen and Yuli, but you mentioned, Yuli, you brought up robotics for building shoes, so tech and jobs, and obviously with Carmen, with Eileen Fisher, you doing the visual mending. What are your thoughts on, in a lot of schools, the access, at least in the United States, for education related to training in, like most students don't have sewing anymore, right? We have a club mend. We have a thing with middle school students and high school students, and most of these kids have never touched a sewing machine or a needle. And robotics, fortunately, is getting a lot more attention. But what are your thoughts on creating job pathways to encourage young people into these spaces as well?
That's actually a really good question because again, I'm gonna talking with examples, right? Um, the the skills of sewing, right? Like mending, that craft is like that generation is retiring, right? So right now in Eileen Fisher, we are facing with our product development team that I was talking about, they flex into our factory, a couple of them are retiring. So when they leave, it's going to be hard for us to replace those many, many, many years of skills. And a lot of these skills are coming from other countries, not necessarily from United States. It's like, I'm from like Mexico, Latin America has a lot of that handcraft, Asia too. So I think that it's what we're looking at Eileen Fisher is like we are actually starting to partner with universities and local communities to be like, how do we start like bringing people and training them? Or like, how can we start doing workshops? Right. So we can like, and how to actually make it more enticing. And because, a lot of these also generations that they're about to retire, their kids, they're not passing that talent to their kids. They're maybe working, right, for their kids to go to university, which maybe a lot of these people didn't go to university. So they want their kids to go into corporate jobs. So they're not passing that. So how do we, at the high school level, at the college level, we can actually start saying that this is like a really good job, right? So these are questions that we're actually asking ourselves too, but like it's a reality. It needs to start happening as a kid. Yeah.
Yeah, I have the privilege to see a lot of younger engineers in MIT, and it's interesting because we do have legacy here of inventing the overlook. I don't know if you guys know, but Massachusetts patent is overlook here. So I think when you have engineers trying to think about the future with AI and machinery that is going to be really futuristic, one of the things that you have to do with a good engineer is to teach them the beginning. And the sewing machine and the textile space is hard. So in 1920s, MIT had the first professor who put a fiber under the microscope. So we use a lot of history in the legacy of the craft. So then an engineer should know exactly how a sewing machine works. And then if they try to make a robot, respect what happened in the first machinery, right? So it's a different strategy, but it's also really creating respect for this craft in that intersection between the machine and the human in a way. But to the point that Carmen is describing, it's maintaining humanity. And humanity is an important aspect of what we want to be as a population and a species in the future of this planet. So I think we take it really seriously, and I think it's really exciting. In our category on the shoes, you will be surprised of how many people is putting some upcycling, taping in them, doing really cool things. And I really want to discover more of them because I think if we really put that as a trend and as a excitement and stories, it will build a whole new culture.
Thanks for that. Thomas, I don't know if you have any thoughts from your perspective. It maybe isn't quite as applicable to the software, but uh,
I will say I have the opportunity to work with some young entrepreneurs as well, and they think about problems that they face, right? And one example that comes to mind is working with a couple British students where they need to wear uniforms to schools usually, and there's actually, they notice, hey, we buy these uniforms, grow out of them. What do we do around them, right? So they've created a platform, circular economy platform about that. So it's really uh, interesting the kinds of problems that can be solved, and young people have very legitimate circular economy problems as well, and sort of empowering them to be able to create these platforms is maybe what I can contribute, or the little experience that I've had
yeah.
seeing this at work.
I love that. And I think, you know, when I don't know how old everyone is, but like as a older millennial, thrift store, secondhand, whatever was not popular when I was a
Hmm.
kid, right? It was definitely like the thing you did because it's what your family had to do or whatever. But now it is becoming more common. And I love that kids are the ones normalizing it in that example where it's like you have young people who are taking it. And so then it becomes just like an expected thing and a cool thing versus like this thing that is maybe not an option they prefer. So
Mhm.
thank you for that. I love that. Um, let's see here. I wanted to just look at a couple of questions. We had a few questions about recycling. I think we'll try to answer those mostly in the chat or in the written responses. So if there are a few specific recycling questions, there was for Eileen Fisher just a really quick if you had percentage of your sales that come from new versus resale, and are there goals to increase resale? Like if you just have like a rough idea about how those numbers compare.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky question to answer too because our numbers are significantly low than mainline. So our price point tiering is from like $15 all the way to $225, right? And we price apart like depending on category, condition. So it's kind of like hard to give a percentage of that. And sorry, what was the other question?
I think, yeah, that was just sort of the comparison of how your resale and, or I guess if there were work things that you were doing to drive and increase or like plans and desires to increase the resale side.
So yeah, I mean, we actually don't advertise so much our take back program, right? But we do advertise our resale program, and I feel like through that is like how we're like bringing new customers also from Renew and also for mainline. So, how we advertise it is through, a regular mail, right? Like social media channels, the same way that we're advertising our Eileen Fisher mainline, right? But we don't do like big, we don't go big on advertising in general take back program.
Fair enough. All right. Let's see. We've answered some of these two other different questions. Yuli, this is maybe a more specific one to you, but it kind of goes back to that manufacturing question. Are there any material refinement technologies that the Footwear Collective is currently working on that you're particularly excited about? And I assume that means within the context of encouraging more reuse.
Yeah, we're currently mapping. So if you guys know technologies in the footwear space, please send it my way. It's hard. I'm a technologist at heart. I think for I was born a nerd and I will die a nerd. Shoes itself, the manufacturing of shoes is technologically driven. So if you think about the next pair of sneakers that are gonna make you jump faster, it's a technology development. So the interesting piece of this category is that we could reverse engineer what we knew about manufacturing to bring it back. That's one aspect that we're working on. Excitement technologies, there is people who is using CO2 emissions to build new source of EVA, for example. So you can start thinking also in kind of creating circular loops in good quality of materials for the soles. There is also the grinding of shoes, which has to do with how do we create purity in the different materials that you separate. So you can separate, especially piece by pieces. None of that is structured in big scales in United States, but we have to, and I would love to expand all of those technologies.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I think we are probably, I actually, Thomas, I have one question because as I was looking at this list here that you said the perfume, the sewing, and the furniture one, I know you can't necessarily tell us specific companies, but is there a particular resale platform that ShareTribe has helped build that you find like the type that you either find like really unique? I know you mentioned the one, the kind of funny one in your presentation, but like, is there a topic or an area that you think is like just wow, you never would imagine there would have been a platform for it?
Well, just yesterday I spoke to somebody who's building one for used doors, and I
Oh,
thought that was niche. So yeah, that was like it never fails to surprise me. I think commonly we have things like used clothing or and used children's clothing, right? Use that example. I think that comes to mind quite a lot. But used doors was a new one.
That's awesome. It is actually really interesting in terms of an online marketplace. I know locally there's definitely a growing, like here in Minnesota, we have a couple different places where you can go and they got doors for days because
Oh,
they're salvaging them, especially from old homes. It's actually kind of interesting. Doors are commonly purchased by landlords because they want a lower cost door for a property that maybe they don't want to, you know, or people who are restoring historical homes and want a door that's period fits their home. But the online sale of doors, that's an interesting, actually, like kind of that shipping doors seems a little more complicated than shipping shoes.
yeah.
So,
I had a lot of fulfillment questions for them. But interesting to hear that this is not too surprising to you, right? Which just goes to show just how much variety there is out there, and if you're in a
yeah.
particular community, you can see the demand and supply being there.
Yeah, the building material reuse, and actually, I'll put in a plug if you are new to the forum here today and have never gone and watched any of the old panels or the old panels, forums. I did answer one of the chat questions about where the where the recording would be with a link to the past forums, and there is at least one on building materials, and that is a sector that is definitely growing. And it's interesting to think about maybe that growing online too, because it is certainly often a very local market. So I think that that's really interesting to hear. So. All right. Well, I am going to head and wrap us up. Please, I know it's a virtual thank you, but please help me thank our panelists. I really appreciate all of your time. I took notes as I was going. I was like, oh, I'd really love to have a conversation with each of you after this because it's so interesting. And I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your experience and expertise in this world of reuse and online resale. I again, thanks for everybody for attending. Mariani, did you want to make any final announcements before we wrap up?
Just to say, as you just mentioned, we have all our material from previous forums on our website. As you can see on the shared screen here, visit us at nerc.org and you'll find all the other forums. This is the eighth forum, and keep also checking our website and also our social medias for the upcoming forums as well. So thank you all very much for today's presentations, for our panelists, and for Emily Barker for being our moderator today. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.